the wisdom of our ancestors. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Honolulu. We are a free religious community inspired by shared principles and a mission to boldly grow compassion, justice, and joy. Our faith draws on many religious sources, welcoming people with different beliefs. We are united by shared values, not by creed or dogma. You are welcome in this place. Please take a moment to put your phone on worship mode. But before you do, also feel free to check in on your preferred social media and let all of your friends know you are attending a fabulous worship service this morning. We are a vibrant, growing, and busy community. Please read the announcements in the newsletter, on our website, and printed in your order of service this morning. We light this chalice with the embers of compassion. We light this chalice with the torch of justice. We light this chalice with the radiance of joy. Thank you, Owen. And now we will share the story of all ages. So if we have any other kids, young and young at heart, who want to come up to the front for the story, I invite you. The story we're going to share this morning is from a woman named Patricia, and Patricia is telling us about her ancestors and what they've taught her. So when Patricia's great-grandmother Anna was a little girl, long before she came to America, she lived with her mother, her papa, and her baby sister Magna in Russia. Tell us again about the tea set, Mama, Anna asked. Well, her mother began, just after your papa and I were married, we received this beautiful china tea set from my Aunt Rebecca in Minsk. Inside the pot was a note. It read, Rachel, this is for you to celebrate your marriage. This tea set is magic. Anyone who drinks from it has a blessing from God. They will never know a day of hunger. Their lives will always have flavor. They will know love and joy, and they will never be poor. It was true, Anna thought. They were blessed. Anna felt nothing but love and joy in her mother's house. And even though their lives were humble, because there was never enough money, Anna's papa would say to her, there is rich, and then there is rich. We are richer than kings, and do you know why? And then he and Anna would say together, because we have each other. One night, Anna was startled awake by terrible sounds. Mama bundled Anna and Magna into the goat house where they hid while Anna's papa ran to the temple. There he learned that the Tsar had ordered all Jews to leave Russia. Anna and her family had to pack up their belongings, only what they could carry with them, and leave their home. Anna was sad and scared. The first night, Anna and her family stayed in a cold barn with other refugees. Anna's mother went to the well and drew water into the china teapot and said, May God's blessings be upon us. Then she broke bread and sprinkled salt upon it and whispered, Bread, so that we shall never know hunger in our new life. Salt, so that our lives will always have flavor. We shall always know love, and as long as we are together, we shall never be poor. Then she passed the cup to each one in the family to share the blessing. The journey they took was many, many months and was very hard, but eventually Anna and her family arrived safely in New York because of a kind stranger who helped them. To express her gratitude, Anna's mother had left the tea set with the stranger, saving just one cup for the family to share their blessings. On every family occasion from there on out, the family would drink from the cup and recite its blessings. When Anna grew up, she was given the cup, and then she gave it to her daughter Carly, who gave it to Patricia's mother Mary on her wedding day. In 1962, Patricia's mother gave her the blessing cup on her wedding day. She has kept it safe and drinks from it with her own 2 children, teaching them the blessings that it carries. The blessing cup reminds Patricia that her ancestors are her bread. The stories are the salt and flavor of her life, And those stories were kept by them so that she would know she was loved generations before she was born. How rich indeed. And now we will form a tunnel and sing our children up to their classes.
Talking about the wisdom of our ancestors. And I must admit to you that way back in seminary, we were given a homework assignment. And that is to go back and trace our ancestry and go back and come up with a genogram to share with the rest of the class. Now, one would think that would be a simple enough assignment, especially these days when you could just log on to ancestry.com and plug in your name and your birthday, and boom, everything will come up for you, yeah? But not back in the ancient days, because you gotta remember, I kind of went to seminary when dinosaurs ruled the earth and all that stuff. And so I had a great deal of difficulty with this assignment, because it seems like I hit roadblock after roadblock whenever I would talk to my mom or my dad and ask them, can you tell me who was, or what was even the name of my grandfather and my grandmother, or their parents before them? Can you just give me a rough idea? And all that they would tell me is, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure, but it might have been so-and-so. And indeed, by the time I was born, the only surviving grandparent I had left was my tutu, my grandmother. And so it was very perplexing to me how our family could have so little knowledge about our roots and where we came from. And indeed, it made me think about what my friend back when I was taking my undergrad degree was telling me. She was from Spain, and she says that we come from such a rich culture that dates back to centuries and even millennia old. Whereas people in America, Americans don't have a sense of culture or tradition or history or ancestry, because America is such a new country that even if you only go to DC and notice the 200-year-old buildings, you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is so old. In Spain, that is nothing, is what she told me. And it made me think about immigrant families in general and how rootless they seem to be. And my family, of course, came all the way from China to the Philippines, and then it was my parents who had then uprooted us once more from the Philippines to the United States. How many of you have had a chance to research your own ancestry? And where does it lead back to? Okay, quite a number of you. So some of you probably know where your roots come from. But more and more these days, I believe it becomes more and more difficult. Because how many of us here in Hawaii, the first question that we usually ask someone is, what's your mix? As if to assume that there's at least two different lineages that someone comes from, and usually they're of mixed ancestry, yeah? And so the question for us is, have we had an opportunity to go back and trace our lineage? Here's what Thich Nhat Hanh had to say. He says, if we live in the US and our ancestors are from another place, we should know that there are values in our ancestral cultures that we have to connect with so that we could share them with our community in the US. We must go back and rediscover the many treasures in our ancestors' traditions. If we have not received enough of this wisdom, we have to find the time to do so. We must make use of all the wisdom of our ancestors in order to build our community. To build a community, we need to go home to our roots and know where we came from. So knowing our roots and going back to our ancestry is a great form of community building, according to Thich Nhat Hanh. So the more I went back to my Asian roots, for example, the more I uncovered that we do indeed come from a certain tradition and we do indeed come from a certain culture. However, being raised in a Protestant fundamentalist evangelical household, we were also told that all these activities that our ancestors used to do were actually demonic, idol worshiping, and we shouldn't be doing the same thing. Things like setting up an ancestral altar at our home. I don't know if any of you have seen those in Asian families or not, but usually it entails having a picture of a deceased loved one, usually the matriarch or patriarch of the family, and then having incense burning continuously to honor and to venerate that ancestor. And it's usually coupled with food placed in front of the altar as well. Now, my family, of course, saw all of that as being superstitious. And part of it made sense to me. It's like, well, why do we need to put food in front of them? It's not like they could actually eat it or enjoy the taste of that food. And it's not like they could actually smell the incense that's burning in front of them. And so it really confused me. Because at the same time, we had a picture of my tutukane very prominently featured in our living room. So his black and white image of our tutukane was actually right there, and my mom would make flower arrangements, beautiful flower arrangements for my tutukane. And so for me, while at the same time we resisted that tradition and that culture of venerating or quote-unquote worshiping our ancestors, we knew that we were still connected. And by having that picture in front of us, that brings alive the legacy and the wisdom of our ancestors. And so today I'm going to be talking about the 5 L's, I'm calling it, in terms of the wisdom that we could glean from our ancestors. The first L I just talked about, lineage. So just knowing where our family comes from gives us a great sense of knowledge about who we are today. And if you're telling me that you actually didn't have a chance to do this or that you feel disconnected with your ancestors, there's the second L that I'd like to bring up, and that is the land. That our ancestors, whatever land they decided to settle in, has also left their imprint and their footprint in that land. And so if we recall the sermon 2 weeks ago in terms of the wisdom of the earth and the wisdom of the Aina, we realized that the trees that they planted tell you so much about who they are as human beings. And that contains in it the rich history of that particular family. In Hawaiian tradition, we have something known as amakuas, yeah, which extends to not just human families, but also to the turtles. So how can Honu, who are a lot older than we are, tell us a little bit about our history and serve as our ancestors as well? And how could the whales and the ocean and everything around us give us a hint as to who we are? So that's the second L, is land. And thirdly, what are some of the lessons that they leave behind, clues that tell us where our family came from? Patricia, according to the story for all ages that Liz shared with us earlier today, in that family, it was the teacup. Sharing one cup becomes part of how this family did its mo'olelo, its storytelling, handed down from one generation to the other. And I often think about my own tutu. We called her ama in Chinese, in our subdialect of Fukienese. That's actually how you say tutu, is ama. And I would just sit at her lap and just absorb everything that she said, as if it were such a rare treasure or a rare gem. You know, just appreciating all the stories that she told me. And I guess I should have figured out by that point that I'm a kinesthetic learner, because how these stories would usually transpire is in the Philippines, like here in Hawaii, it's very hot, yeah? So most people do what Eleanor and Bethany are doing, which is fan themselves, like little church ladies, right? Um, and, uh, and so that's what my tutu would do. And she was of that age where gravity takes its toll, so to speak. And so by that time, her flab had become very prominent. She'd be embarrassed if I told you this story, but she's dead, so it doesn't really matter. Um, and, uh, and so I would actually just kind of play with it, and it was a very endearing thing. So if I were to write a book about my life, I'd entitle this chapter "A Flab and a Story," uh, and it was a way for me to connect with her in that way. And it didn't even matter for me that some of these stories just sounded so ridiculously unrealistic. And I thought to myself, that could not possibly have happened. Grandma, I read the Joy Luck Club, and I bet you plagiarized that story right out of that book, didn't you? And so, but nonetheless, it was amazing the lessons I learned about resilience, about having hope, about having courage, about what it means to be a person of faith. My grandmother didn't need to shove dogma down my throat. All she needed to do was model what it meant to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit those in prison, and set the captives free. She didn't need to teach me about her faith in that way. And my grandmother never really went past high school. I doubt she even went past elementary school, given her background. And yet I think she is one of the smartest people I know of in the world. And these days, I just miss the lessons that I learned from my tutu. And I miss playing with that flab. So if any of you would like to volunteer your flab, I'd be happy to sit at your feet. All right, fine. Moving on. So that's the third L I wanted to mention. And indeed, these days I learned so much from the kupuna that I surround myself with, including, again, Kumu Glenn yesterday, who was talking about how in Hawaiian tradition, knowledge and the wisdom of our ancestors reside not in the head. So it resides not in necessarily formal education, but it resides here in the na'au, the core and the center of our being. Indeed, I don't know how many of you have had a chance to visit the birthing stones in the middle of Oahu. Ever notice that when you're there, there's a certain mana present there? You know, that place is the birthplace of the ali'i. So the leaders, the chiefs of this island would go there to give birth because that's where the spiritual energy flows. And that's where the center of the island is, and that's where the ancestral knowledge lies. Lineage, land, lessons, that's 3 L's so far. Yeah, you're keeping track, Liz? Okay, good. The other L is actually language. Now, I know that in America, we're often described as the graveyard for languages. That people come here speaking Spanish or Chinese or Vietnamese or German or any other language, and they come here. By the time the second generation comes along, we've lost that language. And so I believe, that sitting on my tutu's feet, she taught me the importance of language and the meaning of the words and the aphorisms that come with our culture. And not all of it, of course, is going to be good. So Thich Nhat Hanh describes it as what we inherit from our ancestors are both flowers and garbage. So our job is to sort through that and recognize what is beautiful and worth keeping and what is stinky and what should be thrown out in the garbage bin. Yeah? And so I love this quote that I found from Don Marquis, who says, we pay, and so some of the stuff we inherit too are the mistakes and the shortcomings that our ancestors have. So Don says, we pay for the mistakes of our ancestors. And it seems only fair that they should leave us the money to pay with. Don't you agree? Now, I wish I had a huge sum of inheritance for the mistakes that my ancestors made. And so I think that's another great way to look at it is our language, our culture, all of that informs who we are. So the question you may have is, why do we need to go down memory lane, and why do we need to live in the past? After all, isn't what we're called to do is to live in the present moment and live for today? Well, this whole thing about the wisdom of our ancestors is actually a tie-in and a connection. So once again, going back to indigenous cultures, there's a saying that everything we do, we have to be mindful of 7 generations down the road. So everything we do is for our keiki and for their keiki. And so the 5th L is actually legacy. So our ancestors and what we learn from them influences and makes an impact in terms of the kind of legacy we leave behind for the next generation. So we are going to be judged by our actions here today. All right, so can everybody repeat to me the 5 L's now? Lineage, very good. Land. Lesson. Did someone say language? And legacy. Very good, you all get an A. So let's go ye therefore and honor and venerate our ancestors by connecting our past with our present, giving a gift of life and love to the future generation. May it be so.